Hey guys, Chef Scott for Devil's Food Kitchen. I've got my apron on and that means it's time for another recipe. Today we're gonna make Eclair, a fundamental recipe for anyone who loves pastry and baking. And specifically, we're gonna fill them with chocolate because chocolate is awesome. If you don't love chocolate, that's okay. You can fill your Eclair with whatever your heart desires, but the fundamental recipe is still really important to know and to master. And that recipe is pate choux, sometimes known as choux paste, which, sounds super delicious. It actually is really tasty and it gives you the ability to make all kinds of different products. Eclair, cream puff, Paris-Brest, croquembouche, other French stuff. So all of the ingredients and the recipe itself, all of the equipment I'm using, you're gonna find that in the description below. If you're just interested in the method, that's fine. You can skip to that right now. But for everybody else, I have some tips and tricks to make sure that your pate choux experience is a good one. The most important step in creating great eclairs is great pate choux. And pate choux dough that has been made properly and baked properly has this wonderful combination of a crispy, light outside with an interior that's still soft and tender and is hollowed out during baking, which makes it perfect for filling. To create this combination of textures, you've got to understand two major factors. The first are the ingredients in the recipe and how they're interacting. And the second is the baking process and what's going on there. Let's start with the ingredients. The two main ingredients at work in your pate choux dough are eggs and flour. The eggs are bringing flavor to your recipe, but they're mostly bringing water, and that water is going to be the ingredient responsible for expansion of your dough. As the water turns to steam during baking, it helps the product rise. On the other hand, you have your flour, which is going to create a protein network that controls that rise in the form of gluten. For that reason, I like to use bread flour in my recipe because it has higher protein content and that means more gluten development. It's going to create a stronger shell that allows for expansion to create nice hollow center without it cracking. Then you've got the bake, and the bake is really done in two different stages. Initially, you've got a higher temperature, which is again going to help that initial expansion. But once the product has expanded and is starting to set, you want to lower the temperature of the oven and begin to dry it out. That's going to keep a nice crispy exterior, which supports a nice tender interior, and you get the balance. The biggest problem people have with pate choux are cracked shells. So rather than a nice smooth eclair, you've got a big split down the center or down the sides. Now I hope you can start to understand why that might be. The main culprit is the water. Either you've got too much of it, or it's exiting your pate choux batter too quickly. So if you have too much water, that's usually because you have too many eggs added to the dough. And the fix is really simple. Just pull back on the eggs a little bit and see if that fixes the problem. If it doesn't, it could mean that your oven temperature is too high or you're baking the pate choux too quickly during that initial expansion. If that does happen too quick, water turns to steam very quickly and needs to get out of there before the rest of the dough has had a time to bake and set. The protein's not strong enough to contain all of that steam and you get your split. So if the reduction in eggs in your recipe hasn't solved the issue, reduce your oven temp a little bit or add a little extra steam, and that might help control all the rise and cracking that you've been having. Those are really the biggest points in pate choux. The rest of an eclair is pretty simple. So let's get our ingredients together and get started. Prepare a half sheet pan with the silpat or parchment paper, and prepare a disposable piping bag with the piping tip. I like to use a French star tip, and a link to that is in the description below. Start the pate choux by combining the milk, sugar, salt, and butter in a sauce pot and bring it to a simmer over medium heat. Once the mixture comes to a simmer, add your bread flour all at once and begin to whisk to incorporate. When the dough starts to thicken, switch to a spatula. Continue to cook the mixture on medium-high heat for 1 to 2 minutes. A thin film of the dough will form on the bottom of the pan. That's totally normal. Transfer the dough to a mixing bowl fitted with a paddle attachment and begin adding your eggs. Add in small additions, letting the egg incorporate fully before adding any more. After a few additions of egg, I like to give the bowl a good scrape, and I just use the paddle for that. The finished dough will be smooth and shiny and start to fall off the paddle easily. Transfer the pate choux dough to your piping bag, being careful not to incorporate any air bubbles. Those are going to turn into air pockets in your piping and be a real pain. Pipe the pate choux in strips down the length of the sheet pan, making them about 1 inch wide. This takes some practice, but is actually a lot easier than piping the Eclair individually. It creates a really consistent product, and in the end you can custom cut your Eclair to whatever size you want. Keep in mind that moving side to side while piping makes a straighter line, as opposed to using just your arms, and that the more pressure you apply to your piping bag, the faster you'll have to pipe to keep the line straight. Once you're finished piping the strips of pate choux, give it a good even coat of pan spray, and then it's ready for the freezer. Begin the chocolate cream by hydrating your gelatin in ice water for at least 5 minutes. This is also known as blooming. Combine the whole milk and heavy cream in a sauce pot and bring it to a simmer. While the milk and cream are heating up, combine your sugar and egg yolks, whisking really well so that you don't burn your eggs. Once it simmers, add a few small additions of the hot milk and cream to your egg yolks, whisking well as you do it. This is called tempering and is going to bring them to temperature so that you don't cook them too quickly. Transfer everything back to the stove and cook over medium heat, whisking continuously until it hits 82 Celsius or 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Pour the custard base over your chocolate and then add your gelatin, but first squeeze out any excess water the gelatin may have acquired while it was blooming. Let the mixture sit for a minute or two and then hand blend until it's smooth and emulsified. Last, add plastic wrap to the cream, making sure it touches the surface to avoid any skin forming, and throw it in the fridge to let it chill and set. This glazing ganache is super simple. We're going to start by hydrating our gelatin, blooming it, and then we're going to combine our milk and glucose. If you don't have glucose, you can use corn syrup. I like to heat the glucose up for a few seconds in the microwave to make it easier to work with. Because this is such a small recipe, I'm just using the microwave to bring the milk and glucose to a simmer. Pour the hot milk over the chocolate and add your gelatin just like you did for the cream. Hand blend until smooth, and this is ready for plastic wrap and the refrigerator. After the strips of pate choux dough have frozen completely, you can remove them from the freezer and release them from the sheet pan. Gather them up onto a cutting board and measure them out to size. My Eclair are going to be about 1 inch wide and 4 inches long. Carefully mark in 4-inch increments along the bottom and top Eclair, and then start cutting. If this isn't the most satisfying thing ever, then there may be something wrong with you. I love this part of the process. I cut the ends off and discard them, and then arrange the Eclair on a sheet pan. I like to set them up at a slight angle, and I don't do more than 12 per pan. This allows for good airflow and a good even bake. For my second sheet pan, I'm using what's known as a sill pan, and this is silicone but in a mesh form. I'm going to show you the difference between the two after they're baked. Consolidate the pot of choux and let them cool. Here you can see the bottom of one of the choux that I baked on the sill pan versus a regular sill pat. Pierce the bottom of the eclair with a paring knife using a twisting motion to create the hole. I create 2 holes for each eclair. Using a 7mm round piping tip, fill a disposable bag with a set chocolate cream. Make sure to fill the eclair completely. That's what this is all about. I don't stop filling the eclair until the cream begins to come out on its own. Scrape off the excess cream with the paring knife, and we're ready for the next step. Heat the ganache in the microwave until fluid. I like to use 10-second increments, stirring in between. Dip the eclair into the ganache topside down, using a dunking motion to pull off any excess glaze. A finger helps to remove glaze off the end as well. I'm finishing my eclair with a little bit of gold leaf because I love it, but of course you can use whatever you want or nothing at all. Gold leaf is very fine and very delicate and susceptible to even the smallest breeze. If you decide to use it, take the tip of a paring knife or a toothpick to apply it to the top of your eclair. Now they're ready for plate up, and the best part, eating them. We've done it. We have made chocolate eclair. And of course, chocolate is one of just a million different flavors that you can add to make your own eclair. I hope you guys give the recipe a try, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing. If you are a subscriber, you know what I'm going to say. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss another recipe from DFK. Until next time, I'm Chef Scott for Devil's Food Kitchen.